It has been more than 300 days now, 302 to be precise and counting. Europe's deadliest conflict since the Second World War has created havoc. It has also seemed remorseless and interminable. Thousands have lost their lives, millions have lost their livelihoods. It has thrown the world into economic chaos and uncertainty with rising energy prices. And now, suddenly, after months of escalation, there's a chance in narrative. Rather, there's a change in narrative from Moscow, with matching, if less audible, signals from Washington. Listen in.
Our goal is not to wind down this war, this conflict, but on the contrary, to end this war. We are striving for this and we will continue to strive for this. So we will seek to make sure that it all ends, and the sooner the better, of course. As for what happens, I've said it many times, intensifications of military actions will lead to unjustified losses.
This is what the Russian president has said as his Ukrainian and American counterparts meet in Washington. I'd like to draw your attention now to two things from Putin's statement. One, for the first known time in public, Vladimir Putin has called the fighting in Ukraine a war. For the first time, he has publicly deviated from his carefully crafted description of Moscow's invasion as a special military operation. Second, the statement is a rare show of intent from Moscow that it is not talking of de-escalation, but of an end to this war. So is an end finally in sight as we wrap up 2022? To many of us, the Russian president's statement may seem out of the blue, but let me tell you it is not. It comes after several rounds of below-the-radar negotiations between generals, spy chiefs and diplomats of America and Russia, of course. Authorities of the highest levels from both sides have held talks, not once, but several times. In October, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin held a series of calls with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Shoigu. They discussed the situation in Ukraine. In November, CIA Chief William Burns met his Russian counterpart, Sergei Naryshkin. And this was in Ankara. Mind you, the intelligence chiefs cannot be holding this meeting without permission from the principals. So the signaling, especially in the last quarter of the year, has been very clear. Last month, even top U.S. General Mark Milley sounded a warning bell for Ukraine. He said Ukraine cannot completely defeat Russia. He called Ukraine's declared war objective of kicking out Russia out of all its territory unrealistic. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Zelensky got his message from the White House when he met with U.S. President Joe Biden in Washington. It is now evident that this was the real reason for Zelensky's sudden visit to the U.S. He was feted as a hero in public and told to get realistic in private. He got the Patriot missiles and dollops of aid that he had been craving for, but the price was not sent in dollars. The price was a geostrategic commitment that he would cooperate in the wind-down. Saner minds have realized that the war can go out of control. Ukraine had already begun hitting targets in Russia. And a sharper Russian response could always lead to unintended consequences. We've seen that firsthand in the war. On the ground, Moscow has taken the Russian-dominated East. The splendid Ukrainian response has proved that it cannot get more. It cannot get clearer. At the start of the conflict, Moscow certainly wanted a regime change in Kyiv, but it cannot hope for a pro-Russian government in Kyiv anymore. It has already announced the annexation of 4 separatist-held regions and controls the coastal corridor from Crimea to the Russian border. A subdued Putin seems ready to settle on a new frontier that is less than his ambitions desired. Putin's latest remark also signals that the big boys, Washington and Moscow, have more or less arrived at the coordinates of a potential deal. And if they have, where is the problem now? The problem lies in Ukraine. You see, Zelensky has put forward a 10-point agenda for talks, but 2 points could create serious obstacles. The implementation of the UN Charter and his demand for the withdrawal of Russian troops. Zelensky has just said that he wants a just peace, but in a war, one side's meat is another side's poison. His definition of justice is unlikely to tally with Putin.
Для нас, для всіх, мир You know, for all of us, peace, just peace is different. For me as a president, just peace is not compromises as to the sovereignty, freedom and territorial integrity of my country. The payback for all the damages inflicted by Russian aggression.
So, can America impose its will on Ukraine in the interests of the larger good? Even if pictures and videos from the recent Washington meet may show Biden and Zelensky in a rather happy place, do also remember the time when Biden lost his cool while on phone with Zelensky back in June. You remember that? The Ukrainian president reportedly asked for more military aid, and Biden reportedly lost his temper, raised his voice and said, "Show a little more gratitude." That statement sums up the relationship between the two. Remember, Western allies are now struggling to supply weapons to Ukraine. Kyiv's unlimited appetite for free weapons has burdened and strained Western stockpile. We've been telling you about the West's dilemma as well. Whether to supply Ukraine with more weapons that it is currently demanding, or to take a rather wary look at the US and NATO's diminished stockpiles. While peace talks do not guarantee that there will be peace on the ground, for this war to end, there has to be a deal, a peace deal. While Joe Biden has now become the final arbitrator and arbiter, peace can be more complex than war. But we, on Gravitas, will be right there with you, bringing you more clarity from the fog of war and the thick mist of peace. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.